Let's move on to our next speaker, and that's Peter Pekurar, and he'll talk to us about the fun of making large aperture ultra-fast Newtonians. Go ahead, Peter.
Hi. Well, good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank everyone for attending and the Toronto Rask Centre for allowing me to talk about my passion. Boy, the two speakers in front of me certainly did such a great job. They set the bar so high. I better pull a fast one here and make this a good talk for you guys. I could talk about astronomy and telescope making all day, but I really only have about 30 minutes. So I'm going to have to apologize. I'm going to move through these slides pretty quickly. So please write down any questions you have for later. Okay. So actually, I was honored maybe a couple years ago, to win the Ken Chilton Prize for doing the spray silvering demo at Stellafane in 2019. That was really a big honor for me. This is a little bit of a write-up that I had for this talk. Presentations about the joy of telescope making and using large aperture, ultra-fast telescopes. The convergence of three enabling technologies have allowed the telescope makers to design and build telescopes that just a few years ago were not possible. This is your opportunity to hop aboard this rebirth of amateur telescope making to obtain that low-cost, large aperture yet physically small telescope you've always wanted. And finally, say goodbye to all those ladders and hobbling trailers and all that. So we'll discuss low-cost thin mirrors, very stiff mirrors, mirror figuring, mirror making, some testing techniques, and low-cost and effective spray silvering techniques. Now, I have to make a slight change here because the figuring and the testing techniques is actually a talk all on its own. So but I do have a suggestion for later on. Okay, so the topics I was going to talk about: telescopes over the ages, the age of dinosaurs and the age of hobbits, and an exciting transition in astronomy that's happening. Some of the enabling factors that are causing this transition, and low-cost thin meniscus mirrors. I'm going to skip the figuring techniques, but I am going to touch on it briefly. And spray silvering, and DTM is a surprise for later. Okay, so telescope over the ages. So back in the 1950s and 60s, I think all of us that are of age drooled over having one of these beautiful telescopes. This particular one is a 4-inch f15 Unitron. It was huge and it gave fantastic views, but look at the price, $1,280. You could buy an automobile for that price. So, but that's what they were going for. The next one over here is 1970s, 1980s. This is Steve Dotson's telescope that he took to Stellafane in, I think, 81 or 82, 22-inch f7.3, long focal ratio Newtonian, good aperture. This is the telescope that pretty much set a record, I guess, for Stellafane, put them on the map. So if you Google telescopes, you should see this photograph. It's very, very popular. In the 1980s to the 2000s, the Dobsonian revolution came about, and we had beautiful, small, low-cost, easy-to-make telescopes that John Dobson had figured out and showed us how to do it. So that was a great era. In the 1990s, this is Jeff Collinson's telescope, and this is the era of the truss tubes. It allowed us to make large aperture telescopes and make them pretty portable. In the 2000s, we had went a little bit crazy there with the minimalist designs. Really light, unprotected mirrors, and there were a number of those made. I think there's still a few companies. Hubble Optics, I believe, is still making some of those. They're interesting, and they pack up pretty small, which is very nice. Then we went into around 2009. I forgot this fellow's name now, but he did this a whole set of these beautiful telescopes, ultra light and extreme portability. And then around 2013 to 2014, Mel Bartels out of Oregon, he started making these ultra fast telescopes. He made the 6-inch f2.8 first and just raved about it. So that really caught my attention. This particular one is a photograph of a 10-inch f2.8. And he really is, it's getting into a decent size aperture. Look how small it is. It's got superb edge performance. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Extreme portability and extremely wide field of views, and very sharp. And then there's my friend here, who's taken portability maybe a little bit too far. But I do know a few amateur refractor makers who would probably love to have something set up like this. So some of the clear trends that are emerging, things that I've noticed. So focal ratios are going down and portability is increasing. Aperture is increasing. Scopes are getting lighter. They're on a weight reduction plan. And the field of view is getting wider. And I put just starting because there really is a movement going forward here. And it started with the amateur telescope makers. And now you're starting to see some of the manufacturers produce some very interesting instruments. Age of the Dinosaurs. So this is one of my friends, Dennis Mayhew and Alan Ward, who built this incredible telescope. It's a 30-inch f6.2, and the first night I looked through it, I was over here, had a look at it through the skyjack, and it was getting a little bit dangerous because it was digging up the ground. So we ended up putting that thing away and hopping on this 15-foot cherry picking ladder. And to look at the zenith, you had to put your feet on the second rung, lean your shins up against that top one, and grab onto that scope. And I'll tell you, I would never climb this ladder during the daytime, only at night. It's too dangerous to me. And of course, it comes with a big hauling trailer, so it's a big beast. And my intention is to buck the trend, to look for something different, preferably without a ladder. So this is the first telescope that I actually made. It's a 12.5-inch f5, and Alan Ward helped me figure the mirror around 1996. And I wanted something, at the time, Ron Ravenberg, who has been going to Starfest for years, he had this really cool two-truss design that he loved. And I decided to make one very similar to that. Except I made mine so that the secondary cage fits into the mirror box and it does not damage the primary. So it's a pretty compact package. So I was thinking compact and portability even at that time, late 90s. This is my second telescope, and I really wanted a travel scope, something really cool I could take with me wherever I wanted to go. And the interesting thing here is this is a 12mm Nagler. So this is an 8-inch f5, nice big heavy eyepiece. And I can pretty much balance any eyepiece in here, even the 31 Nagler. And that whole telescope fits in that little box. And my wife, when she first saw this, she said, she walked around it, she says, there's no way that thing's fitting in that box. Well, there it is. And there's space for a couple extra eyepieces, and a couple big eyepieces in there as well. So that was fun. That was fun. I took that on several trips, including the close approach of Mars back in 2018, I guess that was, down to Arizona. So my third project was this 25-inch f4.8. Did that in 2005, the year after the. Actually, I should go back. I actually wrote an article about this scope in Cloudy Nights. If you Google my name, Space Cloudy Nights, and you should come up with it, exactly how I made this thing. Okay, in 2005, I made this 25-inch f4.8, and it was a fun telescope to use. It was really it was a joy. Here it is without the covers, and the interesting thing that you'll notice here, first of all, it does have a very thin mirror. It's only 1 inch thick, but huge secondary mirror, and the eyepiece is off to the side. See, I wanted a telescope without a ladder, and this is one way to do it. And what I've done is I collimate the focuser here, and at the end of it here, that you can't see in this photograph, there was actually a baffling tube that was about 9 inches long, and it looked only at the secondary, and it looked in the secondary only looked at the primary. So it gave beautiful high contrast images. It was really a good setup. The only problem is when you're up around 60 degrees, it's fine. When you're below 60, it's a sit-down telescope. But when you're up near the zenith, you have to kink your neck to look, which I didn't really like. So I made a change. And I actually introduced a third mirror in here. You can see it right there. And it comes out the side. The only problem is the eyepiece came up a little bit higher. So that's my ladder. So basically, when you're stepping on that ladder, you have to hang on to the telescope. And I don't know if you recognize this young lady here. She was Casey D from Astro Shorts. They were interviewing people at Starfest. And she came and had a talk with me the one day, which was really fun. And the Hobbit scope. So there's a reason I called it this, which I won't get into today. But this is the telescope here, and what you'll see is that it's repurposed. That 12.5-inch f5 that you saw earlier is actually the same telescope with shorter tubes, everything the same except the mirror and the tubes. So 12.5-inch f2.8. When I first made this telescope, my friends would make jokes. They'd come over and they'd, have bird bath jokes. They're going to flip coins into the bird bath, the primary mirror, because it looked ridiculously curved. And we finished the mirror. Again, Alan Ward helped me with that. And I'll tell you, after they looked through it, there were no more jokes. It proved to be a really good performer. I was really shocked how good that scope worked. I still have it today. Imagine 12.5 degrees at 2.1 degrees field of view. So this would be a good comet hunting scope as well. And in fact, David Levy saw a very similar talk to this a few months ago, and we contacted him. He was very interested in this. So what you can see is the stars are actually packed sharp right to the edge. If any of you guys have had a chance to look through one of these scopes, you'd be amazed at how sharp the stars are right to the very edge. And I was fortunate that year because this is at Stellafane, and Al Nagler, he goes there every year, and he came. I invited him to come and have a look, and he came and he loved it. He ended up spending almost 2 hours with us looking through this telescope. And what else do you want? When Al Nagler likes or loves something, it's amazing. So really, this became the template for my future designs. This is a 24-inch f3.3 that I made in 2018. It looks similar to the 25-inch because I repurposed that one as well. So I actually sold the mirror and I made another one. And I'll show you a little bit about that. This is shot in Bayfield, Ontario. Okay, a little bit about optics and fast optics in particular. There's a term in optics called étendue, which is really the capturing efficiency of light going through an aperture. And in this particular case, in the telescope, the aperture is the pupil of your eye. And what ends up happening is that extended objects appear brighter. So this right here is a photograph. I believe it's the North Star with the integrated flux nebula around it. This is a very long exposure here. But with these fast scopes, you can actually see nebulosity in places you wouldn't ever have believed it could be, which is really spectacular. I believe Al Nagler called it the majesty factor, if you've ever read any papers from him. And so it's really a beautiful sight to see. What this does actually gives you a wide field of view with large aperture at the same time, which is really, these were two competing, contradicting aspects of a telescope. But now this technology allowed us to have both at the same time. And it gives you superb edge performance. And really, it's enabling technology to make physically smaller telescopes. It's really quite cool. This is just a photograph of the Veil Nebula, and I just wanted to kind of illustrate what you can see. So this is about a 1 degree field of view, which you'll see with a normal 12.5-inch or 16-inch scope. And this right here is what I see with a Hobbit scope, 2.1 degrees. I can actually see the western side of the veil and the Pickering's triangle at the same time. If I go to the eastern side, I can't quite get Pickering's triangle in there, but I can certainly see all this nebulosity right here as well, which is really spectacular. And then, of course, because I love building scopes, I went a little bit crazy here. I do have a 16-inch f2.8 blank. I haven't finished it. I do have this, and I do have a 10-inch. I haven't finished that one, but I did finish this 8-inch f2.8, and I can actually see the entire veil through an 8-inch telescope. It's really spectacular. Okay, the California Nebula. I've seen this a few times through the scope. Looks just like that, except the color, of course. And M8 and M20, I can see them both in the same field of view. Spectacular. And actually, even the Ring Nebula, I can see the two end stars in the ring, in the ring in the middle. Really beautiful. And of course, Andromeda, I can see this. This is pretty close to the view that I get. Maybe a little bit zoomed in. I'm just estimating here with the circle, but it gives you an idea what you can see. And a little fun shot. Me as the Hobbit looking through his telescope. One of my friends shot that at that Ron Breacher's home. And what has been seen cannot be unseen. So it really is spectacular. Okay, so this is a page out of this book, and it's a really important illustration because you're familiar with Strehl ratio. So 0.8 Strehl is diffraction limited performance. And imagine this axis here, this direction, this axis here, as this is you're looking at the center of the eyepiece. So as you look at the center of the eyepiece and you start looking further out towards the edge, you're going to get a point here where f4.5 is no longer, f4.5 telescopes are no longer diffraction limited. And that's because of coma. Coma gets worse and worse as you go further out. It becomes terrible as you go further out. F6 is definitely better. I do have a Royce 10-inch f6 that Robert Royce made specifically for me. And it's an outstanding mirror, really great mirror. And which I'll talk about that in a minute. F8's around here, which is good. So when you buy the Pekurar 2, which you really need it, you need a Pekurar for these ultra fast scopes. So the Pekurar 2 is an incredible instrument. When you buy it, there's a leaflet there that says, "Congratulations, you bought this wonderful thing," and it says it makes an F3 perform like an F12. And I kind of laughed. I said, "Well, you know what? If it gives me anything close to my F6, I'll be happy." Well, I believe it now. It really, I drew this yellow line here, and I believe it performs something like that. It's absolutely phenomenal. This is a page that Mel Bartel's put together on a ZipDob page. And this is an interesting slide. It really struck me when I saw it, because if you go back to the 1960s, remember everyone was making 6-inch f8 telescopes? And it was just the thing to do. Some people made 8-inch f8s, the really big ones. But over the ages, we went down. So we went down to, f7, f6, 1980s, everyone was making 8-inch f6s, and 5 or 10-inch f6s, 12-inch f6s. And then we go down a little bit further and we go to f5s, 1990 when Obsession came into the picture, and they made f4.5s. Well, look where we are today. He did this. I don't remember what year he published this, but this is his estimated trajectory line. And actually, my Hobbit scope is right here. It's fantastic. And I'm actually working, I'll show you a photograph of it, a 28-inch f2.7, which is right around here. So really the enabling factor here, what his belief is, why this happened, is that the eyepieces got better over the years. And the PLOSO, the orthoscopic, the 1990, the coma corrector came in, the radians were excellent eyepieces. Then in 2010, the Pekurar 2 came out, and it made a big difference. Who knows what's going to happen in the 2020s? But this is a very interesting transition that's going on here. So really, what makes all this possible? What are those enabling factors? Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about corrective optics, because there used to be a belief that fast telescopes deliver poor image quality. The images are fuzzy. The background is not contrasty, and that's really simply not true. At least not true anymore, anyways. Perhaps those old mirrors were not figured very well, because it is tricky to figure these mirrors. And really, the Pekurar 2 changed things. It was really a fantastic invention. Pekurar 2 enables large aperture, large field of view, great image correction, and physically small scopes. Astronomy really isn't the same anymore. Like when you look through these scopes, it's really amazing. Future enabling factors, I think that as we go faster, we're going to need more. We're going to be vignetting the light cone into the eyepiece. So the advent of 3-inch eyepieces now, they're starting to come. 3-inch Pekurs, 3-inch focusers. So I think this is where things are going to go. Another enabling factor is thin meniscus mirror blanks. So, the cost of them, I don't know if you guys, if anybody builds telescopes, looked at the price of glass these days, but like a 20-inch piece of glass might cost you $2,000 US right now. And I think it's because there's been a resurgence towards telescope making, but also there's a supply constraints like in everything these days. But I do have an opportunity here for you folks. Thin slumped meniscus mirrors are stiff, light, and hold their form extremely well. So when I mean slumped, I mean you got a flat piece of glass and you put it in a kiln and let it sag. You bring it to the transition temperature and its own weight sags onto a mold. That's called slumping, and it's extremely effective. It's very cost effective. In fact, you can slump. You don't really have to use Pyrex. There's other materials now that are even lower cost, and work extremely well. It does require a slightly different approach to grinding and polishing the mirrors, which I'll show you in a moment. This right here is a photograph, I believe, from Mel's site again. And this is a kiln, a large kiln that'll do, I believe, a 42-inch or a 60-inch. I believe it's 42-inch. And this is one of his slump mirrors. And if you know much about glass, look at the color of that glass. That's plate glass. That's cheap plate glass. You probably only spent a few $100s on that glass. But they successfully slumped it, and he's actually working on that mirror right now. And in fact, he's got dual 30-inch mirrors that are 3/4 of an inch thick that he's completed. Just fantastic. The price of these things is just coming straight down. And there is a company out of Montreal, BVC Tech. So some of you may already know about BVC blanks. The fellow who started this company and made the original BVC blanks, he came back into business again, and he's making them again. But he's making cellular blanks. But in my case, I ended up buying a slumped PVC glass. So these are the sizes he's producing. I ended up buying this one right here, 20-inch, just over 1 inch thick, and it weighs about 32 pounds. These are the combinations. These are basically the slumping molds he's got right now that he could work on. But look at the price here. The 20-inch is only $460. That's fantastic. And I've gotten far enough along with this mirror that I know the glass is good. It's going to work. So $460. That's fantastic. And here's a photograph of a 10-inch BVC that's slumped. It's got the curve in the middle here. This is a 20-inch BVC, and it's slumped as well. And this is my 28-inch mirror. Gives you an idea of the size of these scopes. So why buy one when you can buy 5? So I started building this, and my friend Rhett, who got me into this, he and I both bought our blank together, and then 3 other guys chipped in there, and I've got other fellows that want to build them too, but we kind of stopped at 5. So we're doing 5 of these things. These light zones, these are basically little air pockets between the layers. It's not a problem. it's not going to cause any problem at all, but you'll see it in some of the photographs. So of course we had to kickstart the project properly. That's the mirror there, and we went through a few cases of Stella. So this is a photograph from my messy garage. I apologize for that. This is my friend Carol. He's working on his 20-inch f3. And again, you can see he's working the mirror on the top. So that's the grinding tool. We're on the top. And over here is my friend Alan. He's working his mirror. He's working the back of the mirror. So these meniscus mirrors, when they're getting super thin, the back has to be a good figure of revolution as well. Just rough grinding it is probably sufficient. That's all we've done. But one guy worked in the front, one guy worked in the back. And in comes a new internet friend that I've become very fond of, Mike Clement. He's the guy, I think he holds the world record now in the largest telescope in the world. And he contacted me late last year. He wanted to resilver his mirror. And he knows I have some experience. We just kind of talked a little bit about how to do it. So that was really good, really wonderful person to speak to. So I laid out the 5 mirrors into a circle, and I positioned them at 71 inches. And I emailed Mike and I said, "Look, Mike, we got a mirror bigger than yours." He had a pretty good laugh out of that. Didn't ask me to bring the telescope down there, but it was fun. Yeah, you got to have fun with these projects. They're really great. So here's my friend Carol. He's doing his fine grinding in the final stages of grinding this mirror. And another one of our friends here, he's doing the rough grinding. And notice he's using, I don't know if you've heard of a ring tool. Well, our friend Rhett, who in the Kitchener Centre, he went to the local junkyard and for $2 or $3 bought this brake drum, and it worked beautifully as a ring tool. The thing will last forever. It was really cheap. So we're working on these mirrors, and here's Carol's mirror. It's finished the fine grinding stage, and as you can see, he's got love in his eyes as he's looking at his mirror here. His wife tells me he never looks at me like that anymore. So it was fun. You got to have fun with these things. It was really a good time. So the question is, why build it? Well, when we started this project, which would be, almost a year ago now, we've been working on it kind of slowly, but you couldn't really buy a 20-inch f3. And believe me, we looked. But we did find the optics. There are a few companies that are making just the mirror, but it's around $12,000 US. When we did the math, we should be able to build these scopes for we're building 5 of them for about $3,000 to $4,000 each is what we're estimating right now. Maybe even a little bit less. Well, we'll see. But it's just an order of magnitude lower than buying one, which is really excellent. We also wanted to progress the amateur telescope making hobby, and do it because we can and because we each want one. So our plan is to pay a little visit to Stellafane probably next year and line up all 5 telescopes on the hill and kind of take over the hill. Call it the Canadian invasion. And so I was going to talk a little bit about polishing and figuring, testing techniques, but I think this is a topic that requires a talk on all its own. So I'm going to direct you to Mel's website. I don't know if you guys are going to get this presentation or not, but just look up Mel and telescope making page. And he goes through beautiful detail. Really, he did such a great job with putting this thing together. That's really the best place to go. So a little bit more about the polishing. Just want to show you a couple of photographs. So this is a polishing machine. The mirror is on the top. That's a star lap below it, and it's basically doing just back and forth strokes to create the initial figure for the mirror. And this is called a Ronchi image. So this is a Ronchi screen. I think it's 65 lines per inch. It's just a plastic screen with lines printed on it. And when you look at the mirror through a Ronchi screen, you see the mirror as the same size, 20 inch. But because this is a null test for a sphere, any deviations from a sphere will change those lines from being straight up and down to being curved. So you can see this mirror here. In fact, what it actually is doing is amplifying the surface defects from a sphere by about 100,000 times. And it's really extremely sensitive. If you put your finger on the mirror, you'll see the bump where you put your mirror. If you hold your hand in front of it, you'll see the heat waves from your hand come off of it. In this particular case, you can see that it's a slightly parabolic. You can see I've got a little bit of a dip here, so that zone there around the 40% zone is a little bit on the low side. You can see I've got a perfect edge, otherwise these lines would be hooked. It's amazing how much detail you can get just from looking at that. In fact, Mel Bartels, I keep talking about him, the fellow's done such incredible work. He actually calculated, he has something called a matching Ronchi test. And he calculates for your specific mirror, you give it the diameter, he calculates, give it the parameters, he calculates the ideal, mathematical ideal Ronchi bands, what they should look like at certain positions. And then you can take a photograph of these Ronchi bands on your mirror and drag the image over and put it on top of that image. And he's got software that superimposes the two. So now you can look at it here and you can say, geez, I can see the errors. I can see that I'm getting a little bit fatter here. So I've got an edge that probably, in this particular case, I think it's a little bit under-corrected edge. You can see it's not lining up here perfectly. So it gives you an idea where you can actually work on this mirror. Okay. In this particular example here, very similar example, you can see it's a little bit under-corrected here. You see he's going a little bit too fast here. Sorry, in this case, it's over-corrected at the edge. It's going a little bit too fast. It should be a little bit slower at the edge. And by doing this technique, you can get the mirror pretty close, maybe within about a quarter wave, I would say. And then you have to follow it up with a secondary test, like a star test or some other test. But this gives us a way of testing super fast mirrors, or pretty much any mirror actually, but it works really well on even super fast mirrors. And because the focal test is not as accurate, it's more difficult to use when the focal ratio of the mirror gets faster and faster. And we came to the next problem. The aluminum coating, the aluminumizing the coating on top of the mirror is about $2,500 US. So that was a real bummer when we saw that. So we needed a breakthrough method to coat the mirrors. So I learned about some Americans who were spray silvering mirrors. I think there was one fellow, Howard Benich out of Oregon, and Mike Clement. So those are the two I knew about. But spray silvering, and I label that as an enabling factor, because you can recoat a mirror. I did the math. It's going to cost, for my 24-inch mirror, it costs about $20. It's good for about a season, and then you have to restrip it, recoat it again. But it takes about 2 hours, maybe 3 hours to do it by the time you clean everything up and give it a go. So we silvered a piece of glass, and the place I work at has a spectrophotometer, so I can, this is actually the reflectivity of the piece of glass here relative to the 100%. I superimpose the scotopic curve, which is basically what your eye sees, and the photopic here. And I measured it. So this is around 97 to 98% reflective. And the cool thing about this is look how flat that curve is. So stars that have colors actually will come through in a silver coating that you won't see through aluminum. Because aluminum has some funny stuff going on here, and I think at around 820 nanometers, somewhere around there, has a huge dip that comes down here. So you're cutting off some of the reds. So, and this is beautiful. To look at this is just really, really good thing to do. Okay, silvering jig. I made this to coat my mirrors. It's just a cradle, and the center pivot here is about the center of the mirror is, and edge supports. So this is my first silvering attempt. This is a piece of glass. It's in my garage, looking up towards my garage, and it wasn't perfect. You can see the edge here is a little bit on the dark side, a little bit more over here. So I had to make some adjustments. I ran several tests until I figured out how to do it properly. This is my second attempt. This is my 24-inch BVC mirror. And this one, it looks a little bit yellow because the garage light was on. I should have turned it off. But it was a perfect silvering job. it was spectacular when it was done. In fact, you can see it here in the telescope. You can see there's no yellowness to it. It's beautiful. And of course, I had some extra chemicals left over, so I had to silver the inside of a couple bottles. And I keep these as mementos and to show people. And I did actually do, if you Google my name and silvering, you'll come up with a couple things. One of them is I did a video and of a mirror that was, we call it Canada's Vatican mirror, but it really is a mirror that was made in, the glass was fused in France, brought over to Montreal, and some Jesuit monks worked on and made this spectacular mirror. I should actually provide you with the link to, there's a wonderful article in Scientific American 1903 that talks about the telescope. Well, we have the mirror from that telescope, and this is going into the Dorner Museum. So we wanted to silver it, make it original, as much original as we could. So we videotaped it, and the videotaping worked out pretty good. The silvering was perfect by the time I was done. And so there's a video, there's a link here. You can also find it just by looking up my last name. And the second thing is, oops, sorry. I got accidentally playing the video here. Link, sorry. Okay. Angel gilding. The chemicals all come from this organization in the States. And take a look at this. It's the kit is $109 and does 260 square feet of coverage. And you know, $109. It's probably a little bit more now. This is a few years old, but it's just two chemicals. You also need some precipitated calcium carbonate and some cotton swabs, and you're in business. There is a hazardous kit that you need to buy as well to neutralize the chemicals when you're done. And once you've neutralized them, you can just get rid of them as normal waste. And again, there's an article that Howard Benich, I don't know if you know him, he's been writing a lot for Sky and Telescope lately and doing sketching and stuff. He and I wrote an article back in 2019 about how to silver, because this is his 28-inch mirror. He and I were collaborating back and forth. We really wanted to write an article. I think he references my video in here as well. So, cost of making the telescope. So this is an example. This is for the 24-inch f3.3. You know, what I paid secondhand for the glass. All the expenses coming in at around $2,600, plus a bunch of trips to Sudbury, which is where Ellen Ward is. $3,600 for a 24-inch telescope. Pretty cost effective. Oops, sorry about that. I added some extra photographs here. This is one of your club members. This is Tom Oatvos, and he took this. He built this beautiful telescope back in, I think, 2018, 2019. He brought it to Starfest this one year in 2019, and everyone was just hovering around it because it's such a beautiful and cool-looking scope. The reason I brought this up, this photograph, is that in this telescope, he's got a 14-inch f2.6 mirror, which is larger aperture than mine and faster than mine, and he did this himself in the Toronto area. So if you're looking for a volunteer to talk about how to make thin meniscus mirrors, how to figure them and coat them, he's a great resource that you guys have there. Highly recommend it. And of course, you're never too old to learn how to make that fabulous telescope you've always wanted. So I hope more people try it. I'd like to, just in the last few minutes, I'd like to introduce, I've been doing a little bit of support work with, there's a museum that's opening up called the Dorner Telescope Museum. And it's going to be located at the RASC headquarters on College Street in Toronto. And it's dedicated to telling the story about the telescopes in Canada, the people, the instruments, the practices. And RASC as an organization is a large part of that story. And this museum is going to tell that story plus your story. Interesting scopes that are going to be, that Canadians have made. In fact, the Hobbit scope that you saw there is going to go into that museum when I'm finished with it. The DTM contents span the periods from Galileo's day all the way to the present. and covers the first use of telescopes in Canada in 1647. Also covers Canada's involvement in the James Webb Space Telescope and beyond. So Rudolf Dorner, he's from Kitchener, who passed away in March of this year, unfortunately. He did fund this museum, and we're hoping for a grand opening either late this year or sometime in the first part of next year. So please keep your eyes open for that. It's going to be a wonderful place to visit. And just as a teaser, this is a mid-1600s Gregorian that is going to be in that museum. Just a spectacular, you have to see this thing. The workmanship on this telescope is phenomenal. They were able to do this back in those days. And my last slide here, because 5 of us are making these 20-inch f3 telescopes, it's such a unique story that one of our local community paper wrote an article about us doing it. So if you're interested in this, look up Rural Route or look at this link here. And there's a wonderful article about the 5 of us, how we proceeded to do this project. And that's all I had.
Peter, thank you so much for your presentation. You are a very talented telescope maker. I'm so glad we found you. You presented to us. We'd love to have you back in the future as you continue building amazing telescopes. Let's go to Emma with questions.
We got a question and a couple of comments. First off, from Chris Vaughn, what focal length eyepiece do you use in the 8-inch f2.8 to achieve 3.2 degrees of freedom?
So in the 8-inch, well, I love the 21 ethos. That is one of my favorite eyepieces to use, and that particular eyepiece does give me over 3 degrees field of view. You do need a well-corrected eyepiece, but the interesting thing is the Pekurar Type 2 actually will take even regular eyepieces and make them look spectacular. You will have a very large exit pupil if you use anything other than that, anything longer than a 21 millimeter. So which means that you'll be losing some light. But I had a look through a 41 panoptic in a fast scope, and the images were beautiful. It gave a spectacular field of view. So that is my go-to eyepiece.
Great. The comments we got, Zapfan said that 260 square feet would be a nice mirror, and Draco274 clarified that that would be a 218 inch.
Very good.
And yeah, that's all we've got for questions and comments.
Okay, well, thank you.
Peter, before you go, I actually have a question myself. Does any other company make a Pekurar-like corrective optics unit?
Yes, there are. Batter makes one, and Explore Scientific make them. I have not looked through them yet, through the other ones. Mm-hmm. I don't believe, from other comments, I don't believe they're as good as the Pekurar for visual. Mm-hmm. I don't know about photographing with them, but there are a couple of companies that do make them.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thanks again for the presentation, Peter. Very, very good.
Thank you.